IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Wednesday, December 6th. We are one day closer to Notre Dame's bowl game. We're also one day closer to National Signing Day, and today is Wednesday, so we're going to have a little midweek rundown. A little later start than normal. Had some things to get taken care of today, but we're here. We're ready to rock and roll. Going to talk about a few different topics today. Two of the topics, kind of go together. And so we'll dive into those. The first topic we're going to talk about is Notre Dame had some All-American lists come out, and 4 different Notre Dame players earned either first or second team All-American today. So I'm going to talk about that. Just kind of go over the seasons they had, give my opinion on, just the status, did they earn it or not? Where should they have been? And, I think there was a snub, and I'll talk about, what could have been in some situations. Just some fun All-American talk today. Mostly lighthearted stuff today. And then we'll have a bowl talk, and we'll talk about the Notre Dame bowl game, kind of who's in, who's out. And obviously there's going to be some more announcements coming up this week, and we'll address each one of those as they come up. We had one already yesterday. I do expect some more today. I think we'll kind of throughout the week, we'll have different guys go, but we'll address those as those players make those announcements. So I have about 5 or 6 stories written right now, just waiting on those to happen, because I didn't want to get stuck of things happening during shows like we did the other day. So I went ahead and wrote those beforehand. So we'll be ready to rock and roll, and we'll kind of talk about that. And then just also, just kind of looking at the season and just the excitement about finishing this season, and then looking forward to next year's team and the pending youth movement, because what I see in the portal for Notre Dame is kind of interesting right now, because I see Notre Dame making some moves at certain positions where they feel there's either numbers needs or impact talent needs, or maybe a bridge needs to be built, to from where they are now to where they need to be, and like where you are, but maybe not ready right this second. And we'll dive into some of that. But you're also seeing in a lot of instances, there's a banking on some of the youth to step up for Notre Dame, and what that means for this football team moving forward, and what it's going to say, because we have felt that Marcus Freeman's recruiting has been outstanding at Notre Dame. And that is based on our evaluation of them as high school players. It's based on, what we see on film, and just our projection and our feeling of their meeting needs and all those type of things. But you don't really know how great of a recruiter you are until the players you recruit turn out to be productive or not. So like if you're just looking at Mike Mickens, for example, and what kind of recruiter he is, if you just simply look at it from the standpoint of who he has signed, he's not a great recruiter if you just look at it from high school recruiting rankings. I think he signed one top 100 recruit in 4 years at Notre Dame. I believe Christian Gray, I believe is the only top 100 recruit. But, we all knew Benjamin Morrison was going to be a lot better. We all know that certain players have a lot of talent. And so he's a great recruiter, not because he does things to improve the recruiting rankings, but he knows how to go out and find big-time football players, whether they're top 100 players like Christian Gray, or whether they're 3-star recruits like Benjamin Morrison, because Benjamin was a 3-star when he committed to Notre Dame, not on the IB board, but he was nationally. So there's all types of different ways. And so that's ultimately what defines you as a great recruiter or not. Can you go out there and get impact players and build your depth chart year after year after year? And we'll talk to those as well. So it's going to be some fun having that conversation, just about part of my excitement for next season and beyond comes from the talent that I believe is there. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that here in the bowl game and in the next season. So I'm going to have some fun talking about that as well. I want to begin today's show talking about the All-American list. So there were 3 All-American lists that came out today, and there'll be more. There'll be the Football Writers Association list will come out. The ESPN will come out with a list. The AFCA usually has an All-American list. You'll see Sporting News will have an All-American list. So there'll be a lot of All-American lists coming out, and we'll cover those. But I think we're going to see a lot of the same from what we've seen here. And so I'm going to have some fun with that today. But we're going to begin with the most expected All-American. on the list for Notre Dame. That's left tackle Joe Alt, who had another brilliant season. Joe Alt was named a first-team All-American by CBS Sports, The Athletic, and Pro Football Focus. Two of those three, CBS Sports and Pro Football Focus, also named him an All-American last year. Now, I'm not super high with some of Pro Football Focus's All-American decisions, which I'll get into, but Joe Alt is clearly deserving. And he did give up his first sack since his freshman year against Duke this year, but overall fewer pressures. And I felt like his game just became more and more dominant this season at times. I thought there was a little bit of a lull kind of middle of the season as the whole line was struggling, but I thought he finished very, very strong, had a tremendous season. The numbers are great. The film is great. The consistency is great. There's a lot to like. And he's had a very decorated Notre Dame career. Obviously, he was a freshman All-American in 2021. Comes out in 22 and earns first-team All-American honors by CBS Sports, Pro Football Focus, ESPN, and one other. Let me just find that other. It was Associated Press, and so it was CBS Sports, Pro Football Focus, AP, and ESPN were the four that had him as a first-team All-American, and now he can add The Athletic to his list because this year he is named first-team All-American by The Athletic. Not surprising there. We all know that Joe Alt was a tremendous player, and he's one of those guys, again, that you look at and say not every five-star college player was a five-star in high school. It was funny, ESPN did this thing where they re-ranked the top, I think it was like 25 or 50 players or something like that in the 2021 class, which is Joe Alt's class. And of course you had, I think Caleb Williams is on there. You had Marvin Harrison on there. You had a lot of those guys on there. They had Joe Alt number 5. Joe Alt became the number 5, or was the number 5 player in that class, and they're sort of re-ranked now what they've become a college. He was, I think 247 Sports is the only one that had him as a 4-star recruit. I'm gonna go look at that one here real quick and make sure that I have that correct. But yeah, 247 Sports had him as a 4-star number 179. On 3 says that they had him as a 4-star number 139, but I believe that was them retroactively going back. And then ESPN and Rivals had him as a 3-star. So got him out of Minnesota, and he had a brilliant career. Was a first-team All-American last year by 4 outlets. The others had him as a second team. I think he was on everybody's All-American list last year. It just he's either first or second. I would say most likely he'll be a first-team All-American by enough this year to get a consensus All-American list. The question is going to be for Joe Alt is, will he be a unanimous All-American? And that's going to be a little bit of a more interesting question. I'm actually looking up the criteria for that now because I always get it wrong. And so to be a unanimous All-American in college football, it says right here you have to, let me find it here real quick. First team by at least half of the official selectors for a given season is considered a unanimous All-American. So I assume Joe Alt will get that this year. It is the 5 are Associated Press, American Football Coaches Association, the Football Writers Association, Sporting News, and Walter Camp. So far, Joe Alt has one of AP, AFCA, Football Writers, Sporting News. And so none of the ones came out today are part of that. But I assume he'll be. He was first team last year by AP, and first team, I would imagine Sporting News is going to be smart enough to put him on there. So we'll see if he can earn that honor. Absolutely think he'll be consensus. So that's the unanimous one, and I think consensus is. I'd have to go back and look at that one, to be honest with you. And then as far as you talk about the Notre Dame players in recent years, Notre Dame's had a lot of tackles that our offensive linemen have been really outstanding players. Last year, let me just find this real quick. Last offensive lineman that was a consensus All-American was Quentin Nelson back in 2017. I know Mike McGlinchey was a consensus All-American. Liam Eichenberg was a consensus All-American, but Quentin Nelson was the only one that was a unanimous All-American for the offensive line of all those great offensive linemen. So Joe Alt certainly has a chance to be that this season, and we'll see if he can earn that honor. Another first-team All-American was Xavier Watts. Xavier Watts was named a first-team All-American by CBS Sports and The Athletic. So great honor for Xavier Watts. Should not be surprising. He led the nation in interceptions this year with 7. His overall production this season was very good. He had 47 tackles this year. I believe he had 4, also had 4 pass breakups this season. Just pulling up his numbers now. Let's see, 47 tackles, 7 interceptions, 2.5 tackles for loss, 4 pass breakups. And here was an interesting stat. So as I was preparing his All-American article, or actually no, as I was preparing the article when it was announced he won the Bronco Nagurski Award, because I believe we talked about this the other day, but if not, he won 2 nights ago. He won the Bronco Nagurski Award, which goes to the nation's best defensive player, all-around defensive player. And there were some excellent players there. Peyton Wilson, who was obviously a guy that Ryan and I have talked a lot about, the linebacker at NC State, was there, and Xavier won the award, and which is a tremendous honor, and also ironic because he wasn't even a semifinalist for the Jim Thorpe Award, which supposedly goes to the nation's best defensive back. But Xavier Watts earned first-team All-Americans by CBS Sport, for All-American by CBS Sports and The Athletic, not just because of his numbers. And that's the thing, is a lot of times these awards just go to numbers. And Xavier Watts obviously had 7 interceptions, but it was impact production. And so Xavier Watts had 8 turnovers forced by himself, meaning he either picked a pass off or recovered a fumble. So I'm not talking about forced fumbles. I'm just talking about a guy that recovered a fumble or picked off a pass. So direct turnovers. He had 8 of them. His fumble recovery against USC was he returned about a little less than 15 yards for a touchdown, and he had 7 interceptions. Now, here's the crazy stat that just shows you how impactful Xavier Watts was for the offense this year. We talk about points off turnovers. All 7 of his interceptions led directly to an offensive touchdown or an offensive score. So what I mean directly, I don't mean, you picked them off and, then you traded punts and then they scored. I mean, because you won the field position. I mean, literally, he turns it over, the offense goes down and scores. Now, some of them are very short drives. Obviously, against USC, his 2 interceptions were both returned inside the 10-yard line. Notre Dame scored 2 touchdowns off of those. They scored a touchdown off of his interception against Clemson. They scored. I'm going through his interceptions now. He had 2. He had against Pitt. Both of them against Pitt resulted in touchdowns. So that's the 5 right there. Right now against NC State, he intercepted a pass, and I believe that led to a touchdown or a field goal, I believe, on that particular drive. I'd have to go back and look, but I know that 5 of his turnovers or of his interceptions resulted in touchdowns, and 2 of them resulted in field goals, which is just amazing. And then, of course, he returned his 1 fumble recovery for a touchdown. Just a tremendous season from Xavier Watts. It was everybody's going to have missed tackles, but he was also a good tackler. Had some very important open field tackles this season for Notre Dame. Just an all-around outstanding season for Xavier Watts. And it'll be good to see him in the bowl game. Xavier did announce that he is going to play in the bowl game for Notre Dame. We're going to have an article coming up here soon at irishbreakdown.com that Sean Stiers wrote from the interview that they did, I believe, yesterday with Xavier, where he talked about just the winning the award and just his future and how much he has to improve upon his game and just some of those type of things. But certainly an incredible season from Xavier Watts. And you always as a whether it's as a Notre Dame fan or whether it's as a Notre Dame analyst, whatever role I'm talking about, stories like his are always, I love stories like his, because it's one of those great situations where you talk about as we look at the portal and we see all these kids jumping in and we just see, I was asking myself, would Xavier Watts have stayed if the portal was the way that it is now? And I don't know the answer to that because that was not his circumstance. But here's what I know. With what his circumstance was, kids were able to transfer. And he went through a lot his first 2 years, had some issues with, his position coaches maybe not giving him the opportunity and not being always told the truth about things. But, Xavier stuck it out because being at Notre Dame was important to him. And, I remember him going to the Notre Dame coaches and having this story relayed to me and basically saying, like, look, I want to play. And I know I can play if you just need an opportunity. And they finally decided to move him over to defense, which is funny because the Notre Dame defensive coaches were trying to get Xavier Watts for a while. And then they eventually were able to get him over there, and he just did an excellent job. So he just watching what he overcame and just the different things that he did, and it was really fun to watch what Xavier Watts has turned into and the job he's done, and we'll see. We'll kind of see what's coming next. I think the fact that he's playing in the bowl game is a good sign as far as what his future plans are. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be determined by what the NFL feedback is for him. But I think there's at least. I mean, we know guys who aren't playing are gonna leave. So we'll see if Xavier's going to be back next year. It'd be huge for Notre Dame if they could get him back because he can be. I mean, he's going to be a captain next year. I mean, it would be very beneficial to Notre Dame if he chose to come back. So we'll kind of see. We'll see how that goes. But huge honor for Xavier Watts, who's a first team All-American by CBS Sports and The Athletic. Another All-American today is Audric Estime. He was named a second-team All-American by both CBS Sports and The Athletic and Pro Football Focus. So he earned 3 second-team All-American honors today. We could debate if he should be first or second. I'm okay with him being second on the different lists. I think obviously we know that Ollie Gordon was a first-team All-American, but I believe Maureen Hampton was a second-teamer with a lot of those lists, and I mean, we could talk about whether or not Audric should have been over him or not. I think that's certainly debatable, but it's close enough to where it's just not something that I'm like, oh my gosh, that's just so terrible. Maureen Hampton in 12 games this year had over 1,400 yards and 15 touchdowns. He also had 26 catches for 215 yards and a touchdown. So he rushed for more yards than Audric. He had more receiving yards and catches than Audric, and he only had 2 fewer touchdowns. So you can debate that Audric should have been on the first team. That's fine. I'm not going to argue with you because I think he had an excellent year, especially when you talk about what was around him. But, and he didn't have a Drake May at quarterback kind of taking some of that pressure off of him. But the fact is, this is still a big honor for Audric Estime. And you can always nitpick, maybe this guy should have been there, this guy. But Maureen Hampton had a great year. Ollie Gordon had a great year. Audric Estime had a great year. They're all deserving of some sort of honor, and I think it's quite an honor for Audric Estime to do this. And obviously Audric had a tremendous year, and it was one of the best that we've seen from a Notre Dame player in a very long time. Just to give you some context, so Audric this season, obviously, when we expected big things from Audric this year, once Logan Diggs left and you knew it was going to be his job, the expectations were high, and he more than lived up to it. And that's what you like to see from a guy is, look, so a lot expected of you today. Are you going to this year? Are you going to live up to the expectations and do that? And Audric certainly did that this season and finished the season with 1,341 yards, 18 touchdowns. The 18 touchdowns is a new Notre Dame record for a single season. It beat the record previously set twice by Vegas Ferguson, I believe in 1979, and then Alan Pinkett, I believe in 1984. Some of you will know if I'm wrong on that. You can put that in the chat if I'm wrong, but I believe those were the 2 years that happened. And we obviously, Jerome Bettis had 16 one year, so we've seen other guys have that production. But Audric broke the record with 4 touchdowns. He was creeping up on it against Stanford. He had 14 going into that game, and then, of course, he had 4 touchdowns in that game for Notre Dame and just finished the season off in impressive fashion. His 1,341 rushing yards is his 4th all-time in a single season for Notre Dame, which is obviously another impressive mark for Audric, and he did that in 12 games instead of, also looking at a bowl game. So when you compare it to other great seasons, you have to look at it from the standpoint of, he didn't get that 13th game. I know some of the guys only played 11 and all that, but some of the records can really get skewed where not only do you play extra games, but you also, we're in that era where bowl games counted because bowl games didn't always count for guys back in the day. So for him, it clearly did. But his 1,341 rushing yards, which ranked 8th in college football this season, was the 4th best season in Notre Dame history. Some other records that just some other stats. Audric averaged 6.39 yards per carry. I remember us having this debate in the middle of the season about whether or not he could maintain that average, and I thought he could, and I was glad that he did. He obviously had a very good season for Notre Dame. Finished his career with 2,321 rushing yards, which is 11th all-time in school history. His 6.22 yards per carry ranks for his career ranks 8th all-time. at Notre Dame, it ranks 7th all time in rushing touchdowns with 29, and he had 9 100-yard games at Notre Dame. And really, he did that in 2 seasons because he only really carried the ball one time or in one game as a true freshman in 2021. But his 9 100-yard games is tied for 9th all time. So even though Audric is only really played for 2 seasons at Notre Dame, and even though even if he doesn't play another game for Notre Dame, the reality is that's a great career for a guy that and when you consider some of the things he's had to overcome in life, couldn't be happier for Audric Estime. Had a great year. I mean, everybody knew he was the heart and soul of the offense. They needed him to really just kind of be that guy, and he certainly stepped up to the plate and represented Notre Dame incredibly well on and off the field. And that's the thing I love about these 3 kids that we've already talked about so far, and we'll talk about with the next kid that earned All-American, is they're guys that do it the right way as well. And you never hear anything about off the field issues with any of these guys. You never hear anything about them not working hard, all those things. They're just great. And now what we can do this offseason be fun. We can now have the debate of how does Audric stack up against some of the other top backs at Notre Dame in recent seasons. Somebody asked me, is he better than Kyron Williams in the chat? I don't know who's going to be the better pro. I have no idea. Don't watch NFL football, but I think Audric Estime was clearly the better back at Notre Dame. And, Audric was a heck of a player and had the attitude you wanted for. And I think he brought some maybe more of the intangibles to the table. But as far as just who was the better running back, I think it was Audric Estime. Now, you could argue that Kyron maybe was the better all-around player because of what he did in the passing game. And that was certainly something that we could debate. But I think when you look at just as a pure runner, Audric Estime to me, I mean, the numbers they're not even close. I mean, Audric had 1,341 yards and 920 yards in back-to-back years. That puts him over, almost 2,400 yards. Kyron was at 1,125, and he ran for 10.05. Now, Audric had 27 touchdowns in 2 years. Audric had 29. And then the other part you look at is just the overall touches. Kyron had 415 carries. Audric did what he did on 366 carries in 2 years. So a lot less production or a lot less attempts, but the production was good. Kyron averaged 4.9 and 5.3 yards per carry. Audric was at 5.9 last year and 6.4 this year. But as I said, Kyron was the better pass catcher. So if you wanted to get into that level of production, Kyron had 35 catches for 319 yards in 2020, and he had 42 catches for 359 in 2021, whereas Audric did not provide that same level of production in the pass game. He only had 9 catches for 135 last year, and he had 17 for 142 this year, only caught 1 touchdown. So if you want to get into debate about better all-around back, I think that's a closer debate than who's the better runner. But for what I would do, I mean, I think they both worked. They were both heck of a players. Obviously, I think Audric was better than Dexter Williams. He did it, for multiple seasons, was able to be there. I would argue he was better than Josh Adams. I've also often asked myself, could you imagine what Audric Estime would have done if he ran behind the 2017 offensive line? Think about that. That'd be really fun to watch. Heck, could you even imagine what he would have done in the 2020 offensive line, which was a much better offensive line than what Audric ran behind this season, and comparable to what we saw last season, at least once Audric became the guy, that offensive line was pretty good. So tremendous season for Audric Estime. Now, again, there's only been 3 All-American lists that have come out so far that I've seen. Now, of course, things may happen during the show that I can't see. But you've had 3 All-American lists come out so far. Pro Football Focus, CBS Sports, and The Athletic. There was one player that earned a second-team honor on one of those lists, and that's Howard Cross, who earned second-team All-American honors from Pro Football Focus. This has a lot to do with their own grades and things that they do, that's a little bit different than maybe what some other people do. And like I said, they factor. That's how Kane Madden was an All-American, because it's about their particular grade. And Howard Cross had a heck of a year. He was, as far as the regulars, he was the number 2 ranked player on Notre Dame's team, according to Pro Football Focus, behind behind Jack Kaiser. And if you look at his production this year from a pass rushing standpoint, Pro Football Focus credited him with 36 pressures on the season. For context, Isaiah Foskey last year had 33. And in 2021, Isaiah Foskey had 32. So Howard Cross this year had more pressures in 12 games than Isaiah Foskey did the last 2 years, and 13 games in 2021 and 22 in the 12 games last year because he didn't play in the bowl game. So heck of an honor for Howard Cross. I don't expect him to make a lot of All-American lists this year just because the overall production, this is one of the areas where when they do it right, Pro Football Focus brings some value, but I'll have a comment about that here in a second. But for a kid like him, where he doesn't have the production that other people may have, this is, you're going to, that's quite an honor. He had 6 tackles for loss this year, had 1 sack this year. 64 tackles is impressive for a defensive tackle, but overall just doesn't have that knock your socks off production that people are looking for All-Americans. But he played at a very high level nonetheless. So quite an honor. I was very happy to see Howard Cross get that. He was a very important player for Notre Dame this year. And, obviously Notre Dame coaches are trying to convince him to come back next season. And if they can convince him to do so, it would be huge to get him and Riley Mills back. But we'll see if they both come back. That's, I believe, still to be determined at this point in time. But it was congrats to Howard Cross for getting that. Now, the Pro Football Focus had Joe Alt first team and Aldrich Estime second team, but they did not have Riley Mills or Xavier Watts, as an All-American, first or second team at Pro Football Focus. So that's their one big miss, in my opinion, is not having Xavier Watts. Snubs, I think there's been a lot of years where I felt like certain Notre Dame players deserved All-American honors and didn't get it. When I look at this Notre Dame football team, I don't know that there was a lot of guys that played at an All-American level that aren't getting All-American status. You could argue that Benjamin Morrison maybe is a guy that perhaps could be an All-American this year. I don't know that I would say – I don't know that I felt Benjamin played at quite the All-American level this season. I think in some ways he wasn't even as productive as he was a year ago, but he was still very good. It's not to at all disparage Benjamin Morrison. It just means he was pretty good, but he had set a bar so high for himself that I don't know that he quite played to that level this year. I thought at times he got a little bit grabby, and that's something you have to work for. He had by no means am I saying he had any kind of sophomore slump at all. It just means like his bar was like right here, and he was just kind of right here. And there was also a lot of really good corners this year. But I will advocate for one Notre Dame cornerback that to me should have been an All-American, and I understand why he wasn't, and that's Cam Hart. And so when I look at Cam's production this year, the reality is that's why he's not an All-American, because he doesn't have a lot of pass breakups. He doesn't have a lot of interceptions. I don't think he intercepted a single pass this year. And actually, let me look at it right now. I had like two or three pass breakups, no interceptions on the season. But the fact is this kid had monster play. His film is fantastic. The type of the way he played the run. Now, here's some production that he did have that I think we should look at, and that is that he had 3 forced fumbles. And obviously that was a impressive number this year, and he tied for 15th. So there was 2 guys with 5, a bunch of guys with 4, and then Cam had 3 this season, which puts him tied with a lot of people. But it wasn't like a number like Foskey had 6 a couple years ago that's going to grab people's attention and maybe say, hey, let me go look at that kid. But when you look at the film and you look how impactful he was, how he shut down big time receiver after big time receiver, Cam Hart had a tremendous season this year in a lot of ways. And I want to put some context in just to how good he was this year. So if you go to Pro Football Focus, and then I would argue, and I'm going to have my numbers at the end of the season, and there's still some games I have to finish breaking down. But the fact is I think the number is actually a little too high, but we'll go with it because it's consistency, because it compares them to other players and their same numbers. But in the last 2 seasons, Cam Hart allowed only 37 receptions in, what was it? He played 11 games last year. So in 23 games, he only allowed 37 catches for 377 yards. Here's some context. In the last 2 seasons, if you look at Benjamin Morrison's numbers, the last 2 seasons, and again, Benjamin has been outstanding. But in the last 2 seasons, Benjamin Morrison allowed, let me just pull it up here real quick again. I went away from it. Give me a second. Benjamin Morrison the last 2 years allowed 500 and where is it at? 561 passing yards the last 2 seasons and allowed, let's see, got to do some quick math in my head ever, plus 22, 46 catches the last 2 years. And Julian Love, Notre Dame All-American, the year that Julian Love was a consensus All-American, he gave up 42 catches for 413 yards in a season where he was an All-American. And Cam Hart, in 2 seasons combined, only allowed 37 catches for 377 yards. That is outstanding play from Cam Hart. And I understand why sometimes he gets overlooked because he doesn't have the interception numbers. He doesn't have the 15 pass breakups and those type of things that other guys have. I get all that. But just to give you some context, a guy named Kalen King that everybody talks about how great he is. Kalen King last year gave up 343 yards and this year gave up 290 yards. And everybody talks about how good he is. And he is a good player. But, I mean, Cam Hart gave up almost as much the last 2 years as he gave up the last 2. Kool-Aid McKinstry, where everybody tells me is a phenomenal cornerback. And he's pretty good. There's no doubt about it. He's a pretty good player. But Kool-Aid McKinstry last year in just 2022 alone gave up 352 yards. This season, he gave up 17 catches for 183 yards. Still not as good as the season Cam had. Cam had 15 catches, 137. So, Kool-Aid McKinstry's a guy that's getting a bunch of first-team All-American numbers, and I get it. He's a heck of a player. But this season, he allowed 17 catches for 183 yards. Cam allowed 15 catches this season for 137 yards. Kool-Aid McKinstry gave up 9.5 yards per catch. Cam gave up 9.1. Now, I'm sorry. Those are just outstanding numbers that, to me, warrant him being an All-American player. I think he absolutely proved himself to be one of the 4 best cornerbacks in college football this season. Now, will anyone name him such? I do not know. But I'll tell you right now, if I have to pick between him and just about anybody else, I'm going to have a hard time picking somebody else, especially as a field cornerback. So very, very happy for just to see what he's done. Another guy that overcame a lot of adversity, injuries, position change. I just think it's funny that Notre Dame's 2 best, it's symbolic of the issues that Notre Dame had recruiting the secondary before Mike Mickens and Marcus Freeman and those guys came up, just the lack of consistency. Notre Dame's 2 best defensive backs this season were converted wide receivers, guys that were recruited to come to Notre Dame and play wide receiver. Cam Hart was recruited by Chip Long to come play wide receiver. Xavier Watts was recruited by Chip Long to come play wide receiver. Both of them end up moving over to the defense and become outstanding football players. So happy for both of them. And then, of course, your third guy who's a borderline All-American, I think will be an All-American next year, was a guy that was a 3-star. So as I tell you all the time, 5 stars matter, but it doesn't matter if you're a high school 5-star. You need college 5 stars. And to me, this season, all those guys that we just talked about were 5-star players, in my opinion. You could debate Howard Cross, but Howard Cross is very, very good. Joe Alt, 5-star player. Xavier Watts, 5-star player. Audric Estime, 5-star player. And Cam Hart, to me, 5-star player. There's no doubt about it. And Benjamin Morrison, 5-star player. Because even Benjamin had as I said, I thought Benjamin had a bit of a down year for him, but he gave up 265 yards against a much tougher schedule than what Will Johnson played this year. And Will Johnson only played in 10 games. Will Johnson gave up 256 yards this season in 10 games. Benjamin Morrison gave up 265 yards in 11 games because obviously he missed the Pitt game this season. So still a very good season for Benjamin Morrison. I think for me, 2 things that he'll need to improve upon next season to become that dynamic difference maker is he's going to have to get a little less grabby in coverage. And number 2, he's going to have to get back to being the run defender he was as a freshman. I thought his run defense took a little bit of a step back this season, but all part of the maturation process. So he was still – I just want to make sure you guys understand. I'm not saying Benjamin Morrison had a down year. I'm saying he wasn't quite as good as maybe the expectations were. He was still outstanding this season. I just think Cam Hart was better. But I also think Cam Hart should have been a first or second team All-American this year. I'd probably say second for me, just because he did lack the production of the picks and the breakups But when nobody throws at you, it's kind of hard to have a lot of pass breakups. You want to hear a crazy stat? Cam Hart, according to Pro Football Focus, Cam Hart only had 28 attempts against him the entire season. That's it. 28 pass attempts in an entire season. Like, you want to talk about just people saying, nah, we're not throwing at that guy. I'll give you some context. In 2018, when Julian Love was an All-American, that season, he got thrown at 79 times. 79 times. Cam Hart got thrown at 28 times this year. I mean, people just avoid. I mean, you could watch games; they just avoided him, and you kind of understand. I mean, Benjamin Morrison this year got targeted 48 times. If that puts any idea on what the decisions that teams were making when facing Notre Dame this year, they threw at Benjamin Morrison 48 times. They threw at Xavier Watts 32 times. They only threw at Cam Hart 28 times all year, which is just, again, as Jason Smith said in the chat, that's some serious respect. So heck of a year for Cam Hart, and just happy for everything that he's been able to accomplish. Last All-American, and I'm not going to call it a snub because he didn't get snubbed, but the final category is sort of a what could have been type of situation. Somebody just said that Julian Love played the boundary. He did play the boundary in 2018. In 2017, he was more of a field guy, and he got targeted 83 times. But also the boundary that season in 2018, Troy Pride, or the field guy in 2018 and Troy Pride, got targeted 76 times. Point being, teams were much more willing to throw outside than they were the last couple of years. But the last category is what could have been. And my what could have been is Mitchell Evans, because when I look at the kind of season he was starting to put together before he got hurt and some of the opportunities he would have had, I think we could be sitting here talking about him being a potential All-American this year. Brock Bowers, looking at the national stats, Brock Bowers, of the guys listed as tight ends, led the nation this year in tight end production with 56 catches for 714 yards and 4 touchdowns. When you look at Mitchell Evans, he only played 8 games, and he had 29 catches for 422 yards. So if you take Mitchell's production and you take it and you project it over the course of an entire season, you're talking about a guy that would have 44 catches right now, and he would have, just doing the math here real quick, just give me a second, and he would have 633 yards. And his touchdown numbers wouldn't be great, but 44 catches for 633 yards and let's say 2 touchdowns. I think that might have been good enough for him, and that's assuming he doesn't become an even bigger part of the offense, because he was just starting to really become that guy. And I think he would have had even more production down the stretch, and obviously against Wake Forest and Stanford, he would have been a really big time force in those games. And of course, against Wake Forest, we saw what they did with Eli Raritan. Perhaps that's Mitchell Evans catching those passes in those games. So he's a guy that's my what could have been. The next top tight end had 64 catches for 767 yards from Colorado State. Perhaps he's on there, but I'm looking at right now, top 100, there's no other tight ends in the top 100 this season when it comes to catches. And his 633 yards would have also kind of put him in that conversation a little bit as well. So I think he's a guy that could have been in that tight end conversation. Plus, he would have got the benefit of the doubt because he's at Notre Dame. I mean, that's just the reality of it. They're going to pay attention to a Notre Dame tight end putting up numbers more than they're going to do others. And I think probably would have seen Sam Hartman target him quite a bit in the Clemson game when things started kind of struggling and they were, Sam wasn't reading things out. He would have started keying in on Mitchell Evans. So, he would have got more targets in that game as well. So Mitchell Evans is not my snub because he wasn't snubbed. He didn't have the production or play enough games to be an All-American this year, but he's definitely in my what could have been conversation, because the other game he missed was the Central Michigan game, and that would have been a big tight end game as well. So I would have liked to have seen the production he could have had if with those 4 games. So I'm looking forward to seeing what this tight end room is going to be next year with him and Eli Raritan and Cooper Flanagan, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So that's my last potential All-American. I don't believe, and you guys in the chat can tell me if you guys think there's anybody else. I don't know that there's no one else on the team that I would say, boy, that guy should have been an All-American. That guy should have been an All-American. There's nobody else that I look at and I make that argument for. I think they got him right. I think they did. The Notre Dame players that deserved All-American honors to me are the guys that got it. in my opinion. So that's where I'm at. That's the All-American list. So I'm going to go on to some bowl talk here in a second. I'm going to take a brief timeout. Not going to put the music on. Just going to mute it here for a second. But I did want to ask y'all to do me one favor while I'm doing that. Number one, hit that like button. Number two, hit the notification bell. Number three, share this podcast. Number four, if you haven't done so already, sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Would greatly, greatly appreciate it. I got a bunch of film that I got the last couple of days on Chris Mitchell that I'm going to be putting on the board here soon. That just to kind of give you an idea of kind of to back up the film, the written breakdown I did from the other day. So you'll get a chance to check that out as well. And you can only get there. You can only get that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We're going to talk a little about the bowl game here. Obviously, Notre Dame is playing Oregon State. Game will be on the 29th of December at 2 p.m. Eastern. I got a text today, or the DM from the place, and they were like, game's at noon. And I was like, oh, shoot, I have the time wrong for the game. And I was like, oh, they gave Mountain Time. So, yeah. So that's kind of 2 o'clock Eastern. Just a heads up for anyone that's going to be going to the game. I will be having a get together somewhere down there. Have no particulars yet. Well, there'll be the 27th or the 28th. I haven't decided yet. Part of it's going to be on just finding a place that we can reserve some room for everybody. So if you are from the El Paso area or you're there frequently and you know some places that we can meet up, like a sports bar kind of place somewhere that's going to maybe have some TV so we can watch some of the other bowl games, that'd be great. Just shoot me a DM or an email at brian@irishbreakdown.com and let me know. So it's going to be a fun time. I'm looking forward to getting down there. So it's going to be it's a big game for Notre Dame. We've talked about this and we broke down all that the other day. Notre Dame's going to have a lot of guys out for the game, and we're just going to kind of talk a little bit about just a little bit why I think this game is important. We'll talk a little bit about who's going to be in and who's going to be out for the bowl game that we know so far. There are going to be more coming up here. We are expecting several more players to announce that they're not going to play. I know as of right now, I know there's at least 5, and we anticipate up to potentially 7 guys making the decision of what they're going to do in the bowl game. We obviously already know some of the guys. Maris Leofau announced yesterday and said that he will not be playing in the bowl game. So he's going to go to the NFL. We talked about that yesterday. And of course, all the transfers. So of the guys that we talked about, we've got Chris Tyree at receiver, Tobias Merriweather at receiver, Rico Flores at receiver, of guys that played a lot for Notre Dame this year. Braylon James also, but he didn't play a ton this season. They will be getting Matt Salerno back, which will be good, and some other players, Deion Colsey and Jaden Thomas back, which will be good. We won't see Zeke Correll in the bowl game. We won't see Holden Stace in the bowl game. We're not going to see Ramon Henderson in the bowl game. We're not going to see Antonio Carter in the bowl game or Nana Osafa-Mensah, our guys. Just looking at the list of players who've announced that they're going to transfer. I've said this before. I don't love the idea of players sitting out bowl games to transfer, just in general, not taking the players, not criticizing certain players, just my general rule. But the reality is you have no choice. If you're a player, you can't, unless you're a star, you have to go now. And that's just the window. You have to go now or you're not going to have any spots. And so you're going to have several players. As I count again, there's going to see 3 receivers, a tight end, an offensive lineman, a D end, 1 safety, that were all guys that were expected to be, they were going to play for Notre Dame, or they have played all year, that they're going to have to replace. And we expect several more over the next few weeks. Some we know about, some are not surprises. Some, may surprise some people, may not others, especially since there's people out there that feel the need to put that stuff out before the players are ready to announce because they have no respect, and it is what it is. But so we'll see some more guys staying, going out, and it means it's just going to put more pressure on the team. And I think when it comes to bowl games, and this is kind of what I'm having to convince myself of, and I'm curious what you guys are kind of thinking about it. Somebody said Antonio Carter's transferring. He didn't play much this year. So I'm talking about guys that played, like Aiden Canahan is also transferring. He didn't play much. I'm talking about guys that were part of the regular rotation for Notre Dame so far this year. So when I look at this bowl game and just bowl games in general, I'm 45, and there's just certain things about the game that have happened that I don't like. I don't think it's good for the game, but it's the reality of it. And you have to adjust to properly analyze it. Otherwise, all you do is just you get on shows like this and just complain all the time about how good it used to be or whatever. And we'll say we don't like it and talk about why, but then move on. But when I look at this team, or look at the bowl game, you have to start telling yourself, like, this is becoming as much of a preview of what's coming up as it is a culmination of what has happened. And that's where I'm having a really challenging time right now with how to view this game, because part of me is still very much uh, my stance on Notre Dame has to win this game has not changed at all. They have to win this game. 10-3 still matters. It does. And so big picture, it's still about this team. It's still about the 2023 team and getting that 10th win and going into the offseason with momentum and capping the season off with a 3-game win streak. And there will be players playing in this game that are playing in their final games that aren't sitting out. As far as I know, DJ Brown's going to play in this game. This is not a preview for next season for DJ Brown. This is a kid who's given you everything he's got, who has one more game in him. And, so he's a guy that's going to be that way. There's other guys that are playing in their last games. They know they're playing in their last games for one reason or another. Either they know they're going to transfer afterwards, or they're going to go to the NFL, or whatever the case may be. So a lot of guys are going to sit out, but there's still going to be guys playing. And so we're still looking at this team and saying, hey, this is a finish of what you started in some ways. But you also have to look at it and say, but this is really our first glance look to a degree of what the team is going to look like next year, because that's what makes this so odd, because it's not a culmination of what was, because so many guys are not playing. I mean, as of right now, we know for a fact, when you look at the Notre Dame offense, we know for a fact that, see, 1, 2, 3, 4 guys that were primary starters all season. Really, I'm going to say 4, because between Tobias and Rico, they were both starting at X, right? Chris Tyree's not playing. Holden Stace is not playing. He was their starting tight end once Mitchell Evans got hurt, and then Zeke Correll. So 4 starters on offense we know right now are not playing. We know right now that 2 very important rotation players and a linebacker that started are not playing on defense. And there will be more. But at some of those positions, you're not getting a glimpse necessarily into next year, because the guy that is going to be playing some of those positions aren't here yet. So we're going to see who's going to play like the Z position, for example, in this game. I don't know. It's been either Rico or Tobias all year. Well, they're both gone. Is it going to be Greathouse? Is it going to be Jane Thomas? Is it going to be Deion Colsey? Is it going to be Jordan Faison? I have no idea. Is it going to be Matt Salerno? I don't know. And so you're not going to necessarily see a preview of next year, because Chris Mitchell's not playing in the game. You're not going to see necessarily a preview at quarterback. Perhaps we do, but I don't think that we will. Maybe next season, like the 25 season quarterback play. But, obviously Notre Dame is making a push to get a portal quarterback who's highly likely he's going to start. We'll see what the offensive line looks like after guys make all their announcements. We'll see what the defensive line and linebacker room looks like when guys make all their announcements. So there's just a lot of different aspects of this that you say, boy, this is not really a preview of what next year's team is going to look like, because there are certain players that are going to be part of next year's team that right now are not on the team. And so it's really makes these bowl games weird. But at the end of the day, the thing at the top of the list, number 1, is you've got to get the win. You've got to get to 10-3. And then number 2 is this is a great chance to get some young players some opportunities to go out and play. And that's really what's at stake for the bowl game, because this was just a weird year for Notre Dame in a lot of ways. And I kind of made a sarcastic comment on the board. Somebody was being negative about something, and I made a comment about how, look, we can always look for negative things to happen during this 4-8 season, and I was kind of joking, but it's like, gosh, the way that some of us are acting, it's like you'd think Notre Dame was terrible this year, and so they were average football team. But the reality is this is why we all a lot of us have that feeling, or some of you have that feeling, because we all expected so much of this team this season. And that's what it comes down to. So, like, if the expectations were 8-4, Notre Dame went 9-3, we're like, hey, you know what? They outplayed expectations. But a lot of us anyway, really felt this team had a chance to be really, really good. And they should have been. They should have beat Ohio State. Should have beat Clemson. Should have beat Louisville. Should have at least won 2 of those games. And so we end the season with just this kind of like this really disappointing feeling and this disappointing vibe about how the season went for this football team. But I still think that winning the bowl game helps. It doesn't erase. It shouldn't erase. Honestly, I don't want it to be erased from the players and the coaches. I want them to think about, falling short this season of how good they could have been. But it sort of eases some of the frustration and pain. Not that beating Oregon State necessarily does a whole lot, but it's just more about, like, look, we finished with three wins to end the season. They did take steps in a lot of ways on where they were, but they're not where they need to be. And so, I mean, even some of the comments in the chat are just like, we have to be able to look at the season and say it wasn't as good as it was, but it wasn't as bad as some of you are making it out to be. That's an emotional reaction to what the expectations were. And I get it. I really get it. And so this ending it on a positive note, to me, is important. Going into the offseason with 3 good wins is important. Getting that opportunity to get some work in with a different looking team is important. And those are different aspects that I think are going to be very important in this bowl game. Now, here's what the bowl game also presents us an opportunity to, and I'm going to wrap up the bowl talk with this as I transition into the youth movement part. We discussed it a little bit yesterday when talking about the linebacker position, but the fact is Notre Dame is going to have a lot of guys in these next 13 practices that are going to get opportunities they otherwise would not have received. My understanding is Charles Jagasol's practicing at tackle, not first team tackle, but he's practicing at tackle during bowl prep. He's going to get a lot of work. Ashton Craig's going to get even more work. And Joe Otting is going to get a lot more work during the spring, during his bowl practices. With Nana Osafo-Mensah out, guys like Brennan Vernon and maybe Boubacar Traore, Josh Burnham, maybe getting some work at big end. There's going to be some guys like that are going to get Tyson Ford, who are going to get work in the bowl practices to say, hey, look, this is your first chance to kind of show us something for next year. You're going to have decisions to make based on how some of these young players perform, as we talked about yesterday. If you go out into these 15 practices, and let's say Josh Burnham's playing both sides and he looks really good, and Brennan Vernon starts this kid's, let's get this kid to practice in bowls and then maybe go out in the spring. And by the time, he's going to have 15 bowl practices, you're going to have 15 spring practices, and then there's at least 25 fall practices plus all the summer workouts. The kid flashes now, you start saying, like, we can get this kid ready to play. Maybe Tyson Ford, the light goes on for Tyson Ford, and you're like, this kid, okay, this is the top 100 kid that we recruited coming out of high school, right? So there's all types of players like that you look at and say, they're having an opportunity to show something. Linebacker, same thing with Jalen Sneed and Jaden Osbury and Drake Bowen and Preston Zinter are all going to get opportunities this bowl practice to kind of go show themselves. With Ramon Henderson not playing, you're going to have an opportunity to get some extra work for like an Adon Schuler, players like that. And then there's going to be other decisions that are going to happen that I can't talk about them just yet because I don't want to give it away, but there's going to be several other positions where you're going to say, well, this guy is out. So that means you're going to have an opportunity. And because of the unique nature of this team, because this Notre Dame team is really built in an interesting manner. And here's what I'm talking about. So, like, when you look at some of the past classes, and this is what makes this team interesting. This team has got a very unique blend of old and young and not a lot like right in between. So like when you go look at like the 2021 class that Notre Dame had, it had 27 players committed to that class. But you got to look at it. Lorenzo Styles is gone. Kane Barong is gone. Logan Diggs is gone. Tyler Buckner's gone. They counted Ron Paulus, so 26. Caleb Johnson is gone. Prince Collie is gone. Kahano Kia is on a mission. Josh Bryan is gone. Will Schweitzer is gone. Devin Upow is gone. Justin Walters is gone. Philip Riley is gone. JoJo Johnson is gone. And Kari G is gone. So the expected junior class, 14 of the 26 players, and you can go 15 of 27, are gone from what your junior class should be. You look at your 2020 class, which had 17 players. Jordan Johnson is gone. Jay Brunell is gone. Michael Mayer's gone. Drew Pine is gone. Let's see here. Alexander Ahrensberger's gone. Caleb Offord is gone. And Alex Peich is gone. So 7 of your 17. So your junior and senior classes have 22 players in it of guys that are gone. And so you've got this real unique, you've got some seniors, the guys that are left, plus the 5th and 6th, and then not a lot in between, and then a lot of freshmen and sophomores. And when I mean gone, I'm talking about guys that weren't on the team this season. Like, so Thomas Lammers, like says Chris Tyree was in that class. I'm talking about, Thomas, you're correct. I'm talking about guys that weren't even on the team all season. Because like Ryan Barnes was part of that class. He's transferring. So like there was other guys that are now leaving that were part of that class. I'm talking about guys that weren't even on the team all season that were already gone. So you've got this really old group of players and then this really young group of players and not a lot in between. And so, no, Thomas, I'm glad you made that point because then I can clarify what I'm referring to here. So I appreciate that. That adds some clarity to the conversation. But it makes a unique dynamic because when a veteran player leaves, it's a really young guy right now that in most instances is kind of stepping into the spotlight. So let's say hypothetically, Cam Hart doesn't play in the game. There's no senior or rising senior necessarily that's going to step into that spot because, I mean, Chance Tucker's on the team. He's a good player. They like him. But the next 2 guys are like sophomores and a freshman. Jaden Mickey, sophomore. Christian Gray is a freshman. And so these are all different aspects of it that makes this bowl prep very unique because Notre Dame is going to get a lot of reps for a lot of young players that are going to play next year that otherwise would not have gotten those opportunities had certain guys not transferred or sat out. So on one hand, I really don't like how we just have taken away some of the importance of bowl games. I mean, Sean Davis talking about this yesterday. This used to be it when we were kids, man. Like bowl season, like seriously, like if I didn't watch part of every bowl game, I mean, even as recently as like 10 years ago, if I didn't watch at least part of every bowl game, I was mad at myself. I didn't even consider myself a fan anymore. Like bowl games used to be it. They were huge. They were big. And you put so much stock into how you won those games. It's not that way anymore. It's like bowl season. Well, whatever. No one cares about these games. I used to know every matchup. Oh, I can't wait till the Las Vegas whatever bowl and it's just not that way anymore. But at the same time, looking at it from a coaching standpoint, that's the fan reaction, right? That's my fan reaction. It may not be yours. That's my fan reaction. But then I have the coach's reaction. And the coach's reaction is this presents us with an opportunity to go out and say, hey, listen, we've got a chance to get Jaden Alsbury some reps that we otherwise wouldn't have got him. We got a chance to get Jalen Sneed some reps that we otherwise wouldn't have got him. We've got a chance to get Charles Jagasaw, Ashton Craig, Joe Otting, and it's going to be a long list of Don Schuler, Ben Minnick, long list of players that are going to get chances to get reps that otherwise wouldn't have got reps, which allows us to get a jump start on the winter and spring. That's the positive. That's the spin that's the spin I'm given to say it's spin, but it's also true to say, yes, it's not what it used to be, but there's still merit to it. And those are different aspects that say, look, we as a collective fan base have to shift our thinking on bowl games. And my hope is that we, at least Notre Dame fans, don't shift it to they used to be huge and now I don't care. That's not where I want to be either. I want it to be It still matters, but the focus is matter. The focus of it matters, or the focus of it has changed. And it's not so much this is a big win, got to culminate the season with a win to, talk about what this team was. The 2023 team as we know it is done. Their last game was against Stanford. This team will be different. And this team will also be different than the 24 team. And so when you look at it, you have to shift your focus. Say it still matters, but it matters differently. It now matters to say, hey, I wonder what we're going to see from Jeremiah Love or some of these other kind of players. And so those are different aspects that kind of have me very, very intrigued by this. And it's going to be very interesting to see how we transition into that thought process, changing the thought process to where the excitement isn't about a culmination, but a beginning, and excitement towards the beginning of what comes next. And that's what I'm working on, changing my thought process when it comes to the bowl. Now, let's talk about the youth movement at Notre Dame. So here's where I'm at. Here's partly why I'm excited about next year's team. And I was having a conversation with somebody a couple months ago, and they were starting to already project to next year's team. And, I think we might be like an 8-4 team next year, and we're going to lose a lot, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just listening and letting them talk, and I started thinking, I understand that. I understand that sentiment, but I'm going to tell you, if Marcus Freeman and Chad Bowden and these coaches are the recruiters that we think they are, and if they can just get the couple pickups that we think they're going to get in the portal, I actually really like this football team next year. And it's going to be interesting because this year's team, the excitement was, and we've talked about this, it's not necessarily like elite talent across the board, but it's a lot of really good veteran football players. Ryan and I have never advocated that Sam Hartman is an elite talent. We thought he could be a big-time football player because of experience. We've never advocated that J.D. Bertrand is going to be a first-round draft pick, but he's a really good college football player, and a lot of it's experience. And so you kind of look at this football team, and I've talked about this before on the defense. And Ryan and I discussed this about 2-3 weeks ago, I believe. But we're talking about how what's impressive about this defense is we said, like, outside of Benjamin Morrison down the road, and then Cam Hart, to me, maybe Riley Mills, there's not a lot of day one, day two players on this, and Xavier Watts. There's not a lot of day one, day two players in this defense. And some of the ones that are still kind of young or young to their position, like a Xavier Watts. This was a very experienced team that had, I believe it was, I'm trying to think about, the starting lineup had, I believe, 2 sixth-year seniors, right? And then 1 sophomore, and then I believe 2 true seniors, correct? So you had fifth-year seniors. Obviously, you had Jordan Patel. Three true seniors. So Patelho is a true senior. Riley Mills is a true senior. Xavier Watts is a true senior. So 3 true seniors, 2 6 years, and then let's see. Howard Cross was a 5th, and J.D. Bertrand was a 5th. Jack Kaiser was a 5th, or him or Thomas Harper. So they're both 5ths. Maris Leofau was a 5th. Cam Hart was a 5th. So if you look at your roster, 10 of your 11 starters were seniors or older on defense. And so when you break it down, you say they thrived on good coaching and a very experienced team. Next year, you might get – so the 2 6 years are gone. So obviously that would be Javonte Jean-Baptiste and DJ Brown. Your sophomore is going to be back. So Morrison will be back. You have a chance. We'll see if Xavier Watts comes back. I think right now things are looking good to that, but we'll see. So your secondary's got 2 really good football players coming back. When you look at your defensive line, Patelho, at least as of right now, slated to come back. Where there's a chance that Riley Mills and Howard Cross come back. So you're still going to have some experience. Benjamin Morrison will be a junior. Xavier Watts, if he comes back, will be a fifth year. Howard Cross will be a sixth year. Riley Mills and Jordan Patel will be fifth years. But then after that, you go from that to really young, and most likely really young. And that's what's going to make this really fascinating. Now, you might have a nickel that comes in who's going to be a 6-year guy, and Jordan Clark. We'll see if they bring in some big ends. But you're going to have Junior Tuilamaka, who's a rising junior, but still new to that position. Josh Burnham that way. Your linebacking core, for the most part, what we think right now. I mean, J.D. Bertrand's gone because he's already accepted a Shrine Bowl invite or East-West Shrine Bowl game invite. Maris is gone. Don't know about Jack Kaiser. We'll see. DJ Brown's gone. Ramon Henderson's gone. And Cam Hart accepted a Senior Bowl invite, so that means he won't be back next season. A lot of those replacements are going to be freshmen and sophomores. Don Schuler, Ben Minnick are going to battle for those jobs. Jaden Mickey, Christian Gray. You're going to look at, we talked about the ends, maybe the current freshman class. So for me, and that's part of the excitement, because when I look at these players, we start thinking about the guys that we've spent so much time talking about on our recruiting shows. We've talked about how Al Golden and Marcus Freeman, more so Marcus Freeman's philosophy, because it was started before Al Golden got here even, but he wants to get a lot longer. We're starting to see that a little bit. Starting to see Brendan Vernon and Boubacar Traore and Josh Burnham and Drake Bowen and those guys starting to get more into the mix at certain positions. We're seeing Christian Gray playing as a freshman and playing very well as a freshman this season. We've seen Don Schuler get in at the end of games at times. And again, it's like with quarterback, you can only get so excited when a guy's playing late in the game because there's just not the same pressure. But it doesn't change the fact that when you watch him play, you're like, boy, that guy is impressive running around. And I felt that about a Don Schuler this year when I watched him run around. He played, I think, 31 snaps going to Pro Football Focus. But you just watch him, like, boy, this kid moves. This kid runs really well. And, like I said, when you look at Christian Gray and some of these other guys and you just look at how they perform this year, you start getting excited. I mean, Christian Gray got thrown at 16 times this year, only allowed 6 completions. That's a 37.5% completion mark. That's excellent. You start getting really fired up about what these kids can be and about what this team can be, because you're going to get a bit of a youth movement on defense next season. The key for Marcus Freeman is if you can convince Riley Mills, Howard Cross, and Xavier Watts to come back, that to me, with Benjamin Morrison also coming back, gives you that perfect veteran plus youth combination. And then you've got Jordan Clark coming in to battle a nickel. And that's what I start getting excited about, because what we're going to start seeing next year, and this is the point, and you guys know me, right? Long way to get to the point. But here's the point. We're going to start seeing the fruits of Marcus Freeman's recruiting labor and Chad Bowden's recruiting labor over this next season, over these next several months into next season. The big-time recruits, the Josh Burnhams, the Jalen Sneeds, those guys are not going to be juniors, junior Chalamakas, Benjamin Morrison, Jaden Mickeys. Those guys are going to now be juniors coming into the season, and hopefully they get Nolan Ziegler back and allow him to be in this conversation. You start talking about this really dynamic freshman class that Ryan and I are super high on. Sean Davis as well are all very high on, with just the young talent they have at various positions. And we're focusing on defense now. I'll get to the offense here in a minute. But I loved the linebacker. I thought an outstanding linebacker core last year in the 23 class. Now we're going to see Drake Bowen is going to pretty quickly be able to get a chance to step into that mix. Jaden Osbury as well. Preston Zinter impressed me in different areas. And you're bringing in Kingston Viliama Asa, a linebacker, who's a guy that has the skill set, the IQ, and the size and strength and the athleticism to push guys as a freshman. And so if Drake Bowen is starting as a freshman, or next year, he's pretty good, because he's going to have to beat out some other really good football players. Whoever starts at will is going to have to be a pretty talented player, because he's going to have to beat out some other talented players. We're going to see that at corner. We're going to see that at safety. And I'm really curious to see at defensive line, because to me, the young edge players, the rising juniors and lower, are going to have a very big say on how good this defense can be next year. Who makes a jump? And there's a lot of options. Jason Onye's not young, but he's still a pretty raw football player. But so you could add him to that conversation as well. But when I look at the Josh Burnhams, the junior Tualamakas, rising juniors, current sophomores, new to their position. When I look at Donovan Heinisch, when I look at Tyson Ford, when I look at the freshman class of Boubacar Traore and Brennan Vernon and Devin Houston and Armel Mukum, you start saying, boy, there's a lot of talent there. You don't need all, I think I just counted, what, 9 guys? You don't need all 8 of them to make huge jumps. You need 2 to 3 of them to make starter caliber jumps. Hey, you're a backup, you didn't play a lot, but boom, you have a big offseason. So let's just say Tyson Ford, for example, has a big offseason and blows up, and he becomes that guy at big end. Great. The next guy doesn't need to have the same blow up. He just needs to say, hey, you're ready to help us. You don't need Brennan Vernon to have the same jump as Tyson Ford or vice versa, or Boubacar Traore. You need one of them to have the big jump and at least one of them else to kind of prove himself to say, hey, I'm ready to play. I'm ready to help this football team. Even though I may not be the guy, I could be part of it. And if you have 2 make a jump like that, then you're in pretty good shape because you've got that one guy that made that big jump, and then the rest is kind of saying, hey, we can help and be part of a great rotation. And then, of course, the same thing, a linebacker. You don't need Jalen Sneed, Nolan Ziegler, Drake Bowen, Preston Zinter, Jaden Alsbury, Kingston Williams-Asa, all to make huge jumps next year. You really just need 2 of them. And then you need a couple others to make good jumps next year. And they're going to get Keanu Kia back next season. Although I'm going to give him a year to get himself back into shape before I expect things from him. He may be ready to play. I'm not going to demand it right away. But the point is, you just need really 2 of them. The way that Notre Dame's going to play, when you look at their schedule, they're going to play a lot of nickel next year, just like they did this year. So you really need 2 of them to have those big jumps. And then the others to say, you're a good quality backup. We can put you in the game and you can do the job. And if more than that step up, great. So that's the thing is, asking 15 freshmen and sophomores to all have to come out and be the guy is unfair and unrealistic. But you don't need that. You need 5, 6 of them to step up and maybe be really good players. Because if you can get the players I talked about earlier to come back, that's your foundation. You already have 2 All-American players in the secondary. You don't need Christian Gray to also be a star. If he is, great. You don't need Jaden Mickey to be Cam Hart. You just need him to be better, to get better than what he is right now. And he had a solid year this year. Now you need him to take another leap. You need Christian Gray to take a leap. But you don't need him to be Benjamin Morrison. You don't need a Don Schuler to be Xavier Watts because you already have Xavier Watts. You don't need Devin Houston and Armel Mukum and those guys, Jason Onya, to be Riley Mills and Howard Cross because you already have Riley Mills and Howard Cross and Gabriel Rubio. You just need them to get better and to make your depth chart better. And then at defensive end, you're going to need some guys to step up there. That's the one position, especially big end, where you need somebody's going to have to step up and have that big offseason for Notre Dame. But you don't need all of them to do it. And that's what I'm excited about because when you recruit the way that Marcus Freeman and Chad Bowden and Mike Mickens and now Washington and this staff has recruited the last couple of years, you have raised the floor because no longer are you needing some undersized high motor kid to be that guy or super raw kid to come and be that guy. They've raised that bar a little bit to me to where the raw players are so much more naturally gifted than what they used to be. I mean, they used to have like Devin Upal and Will Schweitzer type of raw players. Now it's the Boubacars and the Brendan Vernons and guys that were 4-star recruits, but I'm talking my 4-star, what I view as 4-star recruits, big time players, Devin Houston's and players like that, Tyson Ford's. There's a lot of talent, man. It's a lot of talent. And so the more of those guys that pan out, the better they're going to be. When you look at the offense, it's a similar situation. You're going to have a lot of 22 class and younger guys are going to be counted on a lot next year. Quarterback, we'll see. But I would even argue there it's important because if Notre Dame gets Riley Leonard, he is a guy that likes to run. If he does get hurt, you need to have those guys ready to step in and lead you to victories. But you look at the receiving core. Yes, you're going to have some veterans. You're going to have Deion Colsey. You're going to have Jaden Thomas. You're going to have Chris Mitchell, maybe some more. But Jaden Greathouse is a guy that needs to step up and has a chance to step up and be that dude. Jordan Faison is going to be a part of this conversation. Eli Raridan is going to be very important for Notre Dame next year because you're not going to have Mitchell Evans most likely early in the year. And now there's no – and somebody mentioned earlier too, I completely forgot about Bryce Young as a guy that could potentially come in this spring and compete as well. That's another one for the defensive line, Malachi. Thank you for that reminder, because there is that talent. Leonard Moore at corner, so that, Bronte Johnson, there's a freshman as well. So when I look over at the defense or the offense, your running back room, if Audric goes pro, we'll see if he does or not, but I think we all assume that that's what's going to happen. But if Audric goes pro, you're going to have a very inexperienced running back room, but it's very talented, and it's more they're going to have more production than the Logan Diggs Audric Estime combo had going into their. I believe I'm going to do the math here real quick just to make sure that I'm correct. But Logan Diggs and Audric Estime in the year prior to them kind of taking over as the dudes had 290 rushing yards in 2021 as freshmen. So this season, when you look at Jeremiah Love, yeah, I'm correct on this. Jeremiah Love has more production than those two kids combined. He has 346 rushing yards. And then when you add the 166 by Jadarian Price, and then you have 144 by Jabron Payne, now you're talking about a young running back room, but a group that is much more productive than what we've seen from past seasons. Remember, when Kyron Williams took over as the guy in 2020, he had 4 carries the year before. 4. This group is going to come into next year with 656 rushing yards. And so it's going to be young, and it's exciting. And it's one of those things where I'm in this weird situation, and I'm curious if you guys in the chat and those listening on podcasts feel the same way. I had so much fun watching Audric Estime play this year. Just a great kid and a really productive player, and just great story. Just a Notre Dame kid through and through in so many different ways. Like, I'll always remember that picture of him. I think he was a freshman when they were doing those sand workouts, and he kind of gets up and he's like jacked up. He's got sand all over his face, and you're just like, and this kid's going to be fun to watch these next couple of years. And he was. But then I look at it and I'm like, does me getting excited about the running back room with Dylan McCullough next year, with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and Jabron Payne and Kedron Young and Aeneas Williams, is it wrong that I'm really excited about seeing that? And that it's not that I want Audric to be gone, but I'm excited about knowing that we think he will be to what's coming. It's kind of exciting. Like, is that wrong? Is it disrespectful to Audric? Because that's how I feel. Like, I loved that kid, but I'm really excited to see what's coming down the pike. You look at wide receiver, I'm looking forward to seeing what Chris Mitchell is going to do. I think Deion Colesy can be a breakout player for Notre Dame if he can just stay healthy and, do some of the things he needs to do to thrive. And then I look at it and I look the other way and it's like, but man, I can't wait to see what Jaden Greathouse can be in year 2, especially if they can keep him in the slot where he looked really good. I'm looking forward to, finally got a little taste of Eli Raridan this season. And you're like, yep, he's a dude, right? He could be really good. Cooper Flanagan is going to be a big part of it. We got to see a chance to see Billy Schrouth and Ashton Craig and Charles Jagasol in a very, very little bit. But, the best the line looked all year was when Ashton Craig and Billy Schrouth stepped into the lineup, outside of maybe the Ohio State game. So you start kind of getting excited, but a lot of the excitement comes from because there's this belief that Marcus Freeman and Chad Bowden have recruited really, really well. And it's going to get put to the test. And I didn't even talk about a lot of the freshmen. I mean, Cam Williams and Micah Gilbert and Logan Saldate. There's just a lot of excitement about what's coming down the pike for Notre Dame. And it just starts, you say, man, I love what the kids that have played have done. But man, I'm excited to see this next batch, because the overall point is what I believe, what Notre Dame is going to lose this offseason at everywhere but tackle, I believe tackle, because again, Joe Walt hasn't announced yet, but I think the assumption is out there. I'm not taking anyone's moment by saying, guys, I don't think Joe Walt's going to be back next year. That's something we've been talking about since the summer. Other than that position, which is a concern of mine, I look at these other positions. I'm like, I'm sad to see him go. 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 But man, I can't wait to see what's coming down the pike, because what Notre Dame is going to lose and experience, they are going to, in my opinion, make up for in raw talent. Now, the question is now, and this is how I'll end it, will they develop it? And to me, that's the biggest unknown, a bit of an unknown, but also the biggest gauge of where this program is going to be is in that regard. Because if this staff is the developers that I hope they are, or that they need to be for Notre Dame to make that jump, then I look at this team and say, if this guy cannot get that group of players ready to go, then he may not be that guy you need. If that guy can't get these kids coached up the way you need, then he may not be that guy. And there's certain positions it's just assumed they're going to thrive. I mean, I just kind of assume that Dylan McCullough, if he's the running backs coach next year, I just assume those running backs are going to be great because I just think Dylan McCullough is a heck of a running backs coach. And with all due respect to Audric and Logan Diggs, there's going to be more God-given talent in the room next year than there was in the 2022 group at running back. Receiver, it's going to be young. There's going to be some new transfers coming in, but man, it's going to be a very talented room. Do you have a guy that can coach it up? That's an unknown, right? Like tight end, I feel like they're going to be good because one thing, whatever you feel about Jared Parker as an OC, it's a different time and place for that debate. As a tight ends coach, he's been pretty good in his 2 years. What's Joe Rudolph? I don't know, but we're going to find out. We're going to find out next year because, how can he get Ashton Craig and Billy Stroud to take jumps? Can he get Rocco to take a jump? Can he develop the tackles? Those are all question marks we don't have answers to right now. But I look at it and say, boy, if you're a good coach, you look at you're young. But you've got Charles Jagasol, Gearby Lambert, Tosh Baker, Emil Wagner, Billy Schrouth, Sullivan Absher, Rocco Spindler, Ashton Craig, Joe Otting, Sam Pendleton. There's a lot of talent there. If you can coach, you should be able to put a pretty good offensive line together. May not always be consistent because you're going to be young, but it better have some dominant moments. And that's kind of when I look at it. Same with Al Washington. I like what Al Washington did this year. He's going to be tested again next year because he's not going to have, quite the same experience at one of the big end positions. And so, but if he can build on what he did this year, I'm excited to see what he's going to do with the young guys next year. And we know Mike Mickens is a dude. Chris O'Leary's proven to me that he's a very good football coach. He's taken guys that played other positions and gotten the most out of them. Can he take young guys and develop them? That's something we don't know. We've never seen Chris O'Leary, because of just the lack of time he spent at Notre Dame, take a kid as a freshman and build him into something different. He inherited Kyle Hamilton. He inherited Xavier Watts from the receiving corps. He inherited Ramon Henderson from cornerback. DJ Brown he inherited I think DJ was a junior when he got here. Can he take an Adon Schuler and a Ben Minnick and a Bronte Johnson or a Kennedy Urlacher or whoever else and build them into good football players? I think so, but we don't know. We got to see it. And then the biggest question mark for me on defense, offense is offensive line. No doubt about it. Defensively, the question is going to be, can Al Golden, if he's back, or whoever, if he leaves, whoever replaces him, but whoever's coaching linebackers, do they need fifth-year seniors to get this defense to play well? Or can they get young, very talented younger players ready to play at a high level? That's a question mark we're going to have for next season, because linebacker play is very, very important in today's game. It's very, very important. And you're going to have some young guy moments next year. You just are. But I don't want to see Notre Dame go to the portal to get a veteran linebacker. I don't. I'll be real pissed about that, to be completely honest with you. But I want to see, can you coach up Drake Bowen and get him ready to play? Can you coach up Kingston Viliama-Asa and get him ready to play? Can you coach up Jalen Sneed and Jaden Alsbury and get them ready to play? Between those two kids, if you can't be loaded at will, if we get one of those two guys to be a pretty darn good will linebacker, maybe you're not a very good coach. Those are all things that I look at and say, hey man, I'm really curious to see, what this guy can be and what these players can be, because the one thing that this coaching staff will have next season, and there's little doubt about it, unless I'm wrong and they're wrong and most of the people in the chat are wrong. When I look at next year's football team, the one thing that there's two things I can say about next year's football team. In a lot of places, they're going to be pretty young and or inexperienced. But the other thing I can look at about next year's team is they're going to be very, very talented. And I think that youth movement is necessary. Perhaps they won't have enough experience to be a title contender next season. Maybe that's true. But when I look at this team, I say they have the talent to certainly go out there and be a 10+ win football team next year. Beyond that, let's see who they get in the portal. Let's see, some of the different areas that they, some of the different things that they do in regard to, high school and development in the spring and all those different type of things. But this team has a chance to be very, very talented next year. We'll see if it can be good, though. We'll find out about that here very, very soon. So that is something I'm excited about because I think it's needed. Because the way the final piece is, if there are some stumbling blocks next year, but the development is good. Not by stumbling blocks, I mean just you're young and you make young guy mistakes. So it's going to happen, and maybe they cost you. Maybe there's some teams on your schedule that are a little better than you think you are, and you go 10-2, and maybe you're a playoff team, maybe you're not a playoff team. But even if there are, you start looking to next season, and you start getting excited about the 25 season because now this is an actual legitimate reason to say wait till next year. But I'm still very excited to see this 24 team because I truly believe if the development is proper, that team has a chance to be really, really good, really good. And I'm looking forward to watching it. So that's going to do it for the youth movement part. I do have there are some super chats, and I did star a few questions. I don't normally do mailbags when it's just me because it's very hard to handle the chat and stay focused. As you guys know, I can get distracted pretty easily. But I did see some questions in there that I thought were good. I'm actually going through starring them now. And of course, there are some super chats. So it's not going to be a super, super long mailbag, I don't think. Although the last time I said that, we did like 2 hours worth of mailbag, but I'm pretty sure, I promise we're not going to do that this time. But I am trying to go through and star some of these questions for the mailbag. But we'll get to a mailbag next. But before we do, folks, do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Please share this podcast. We greatly appreciate that. And if you've not done so, please sign up for the message boards at boards.rspeckdown.com. Oh, and I wanted to give you guys a heads up on something. I am not being paid to say this. The company that I'm about to talk about is not currently advertising with us, but there was a company that advertised with us, I think last week or a couple weeks ago. And they, a lot of times when a company will advertise with us, what they'll do is they'll give us free samples. And I'm also someone who likes to say, look, if I'm going to tell people they need to do something, I want to be able to say that I've tried it or not. Or if when I talk about it in the thing, I'm not going to act like I've tried something that I haven't tried. So this company is called Factor Meals, right? Factor. And the website's factor75.com. Now, if you go there and you type in, you can use the promo code Irish, and you can get I believe it's 50% off your first try. Guys, I'm telling you, I'm not being paid for this. If you use that promo code, I get nothing for it. It's not a deal where I get a cut of whatever you spend. I'm telling you this because I love it. They're like freshly made, they're freshly made meals that get sent to you, and you have to use them by a week or freeze them. We usually use them, but guys, I'm telling you, I don't eat vegetables. Anyone that knows me knows I don't eat vegetables. I've eaten broccoli. I had cauliflower rice the other day. I had a meal the other day that I was like, this is going to be interesting because I cook steak a lot at home. I like steak, and I'm very good at cooking steak. I think the people that have been on this channel a long time know that I like to cook. I'm a pretty good chef, and you can look. I'm a good cook. But they had a filet mignon on a mushroom risotto, and I was like, this is going to be interesting because you got to put it in the microwave for 2.5 minutes. How's this going to be? It's one of the best things I've ever had in my life. I've had about 5 or 6 of these already. And the worst one that I had was still a really good meal. So if you guys are people that I'm busy all the time, and so I like to it's just nice because I don't have time to cook tonight. I don't have time to do dishes. I got a million things going on. You pop in the microwave for 2.5 minutes, and it is, just great food. And it's healthy. You can do keto, you can do protein plus, you can do calorie conscious. There's different types of meals. I'm just telling y'all, check it out. It's factor75.com. You can use the promo code Irish to get, I think it's 50% off of your first meal. If you're someone who's looking for that kind of thing, guys, I'm just telling you, I'm telling you, this is just Brian, just as a community, just friends, give it a shot. I'm telling you, it's phenomenal. The taste is so good, and I'm a pretty picky eater, so it's really good. So I want to end on that, but I just want to give you guys a quick heads up about that before we go to the mailbag. So let's dive into the mailbag, and it's going to be get to some of these questions. Like I said, there's a lot of good questions today. We did have some super chats, which I greatly appreciate. Michael S. asks, is Hartman playing in the bowl? What's your expectation? Sam Hartman has not announced his intentions yet, but I do not anticipate him playing in the bowl game. That's just I do not anticipate him playing in the bowl game. But thank you for your super chat, Michael S. We have a super chat from Charlie Weiss's last belt loop. I know we need to see the results of what Freeman era can be, but I do think he has had a lot thrown his way and a mess to clean up. The future is bright. I agree, Charlie, and I'm glad to see some positivity from you, man. I certainly agree with that. Couple super chats here from Wicked Bronco Productions. Thoughts on just how good Chris Mitchell is based on his tape. I've seen some casual fans say he's not good because he played at FIU. Also, if we get a transfer portal class of Riley Leonard, Josh Kelly, Jordan Clark, Bo Collins, did Notre Dame win the transfer portal in 2024? A couple things. Number one is why would you take the impression of casual fans on how good anyone is? They're by definition of being casual fans, they're not going to have a clue. We talked a lot about Chris Mitchell yesterday. I have a film breakdown up of him. I'll have something on the premium board, which will have some actual clips of those to kind of break it down. We spent a lot of time on him yesterday and in previous shows breaking his film down. I'm not going to do that again. I would encourage you to just to go watch those shows. But the fact is I think Chris Mitchell's a good football player. Do I think he's going to come to Notre Dame and repeat the production he had at FIU? I don't. Do I think he can come here and have a Kevin Stefferson 2016, 2017 type of impact? Absolutely, I do, because I think they're very similar players. So could I see him coming in here and catching 40 balls next year for 700 yards or more? Sure, I could see that. The thing is, he's not going to need to be what he was at FIU. He's going to have a much better supporting cast around him. So anyone that just says because he's at FIU, he's not a good player, that's not someone whose opinion you should really care about, to be completely honest with you, because they're just not knowledgeable of it. The last part, will they have won the transfer portal in 2024? Yeah, I don't. There's a lot of people that are going to have much bigger portal classes than Notre Dame, but that would be one heck of a portal class. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I would say that I would personally still like, would they win it? I'd still say no, because I still feel one safety is needed, a back end safety. And I still wouldn't mind seeing at least a depth end, even if he's not a dude, just someone that can give you a floor to where it's like, if these guys don't step up, you at least have that, like an RJ Open type of guy where, perfect world, RJ Open comes to Notre Dame and he's just part of rotation with a Brendan Vernon or Bubakar or Tyson Ford or, Josh Burnham or maybe several of those guys. And you can just kind of have him be a pass rusher and situational guy, whatever. And the other younger guys get a lot of playing time too. That'd be ideal. But what if he doesn't come, or a guy like him doesn't come, and those guys don't pan out, or they're not ready, or they wear down as the season goes on? Then you're in trouble. So I think those two positions I still feel would need to be addressed with that situation. And so I say they'd still have some needs there, to be honest with you. Next question, super chat from Wicked Bronco Productions. Do you think Notre Dame pursues any guys from A&M, especially at either 5-star D tackle? No, they will not be going after the 5-star D tackles. Guys, look, I'm going to say it again. Guys like that going to the portal, they already have an idea of where they're going, and they're looking for big paydays. And Notre Dame is not going to give a big payday to those kids. And then any thoughts on adding UTSA linebacker Trey Moore? 4 years of experience. He's a superstar caliber linebacker and started since he was a true freshman. I can't tell you that I'm familiar enough with his game to have an opinion on that, but I will write it down. Truly going to write it down, and I'll go check out his film. So, but I will say this. Without having seen him play, number one, if he is a 4-year player and he has superstar talent, he's going to go to the NFL, not transfer. Look, NFL doesn't care about Power 5 versus whatever else. NFL cares about, are you a good player or not? And again, I haven't seen this kid play. I don't know if he's a linebacker. Is he a Viper? I don't know what he'd be at Notre Dame. He had one good season. I'm looking at his numbers now, or 2 good seasons at UTSA. If he is a superstar caliber player, he's an NFL guy. I mean, look, they drafted a linebacker from Tulsa in the first round a couple years ago. If he's, that doesn't mean he can't help Notre Dame. I haven't seen him. I just kind of feel like if he's a Viper type of guy, I'd look at him. If he's an off-ball linebacker type of guy, I would not look at him. Looking at it, and again, I have not seen him play, so keep that in mind. I'm simply looking at his numbers and his body type. If he's a Viper type, I would say look at him, because I think some of Notre Dame's current Vipers could go play big end and answer some of your concerns there. I don't know anything about the kid. Would he be an academic fit? Is he going to graduate? I'm none of those. I don't know answers to any of those. I'm just looking at his numbers. If he's a legitimate edge rusher type, and if he does have superstar potential, maybe he just needs a bigger stage like Jared Verse did, right? Because your counter argument to what I just said about if he was that good to go pro would be Jared Verse, although I don't think Jared Verse was eligible to go pro out of Albany. But anyway, my point would be, if he's an off-ball linebacker, I wouldn't look at him. I understand that there's experience and all that, but to me, these are guys that Marcus Freeman recruited. These are Marcus Freeman's hand-picked linebacker recruits. If he is the recruiter we think he is and has the eye for talent we need him to have as Notre Dame fans, they need to trust their evaluations of those linebackers. I mean, Jalen Sneed, Nolan Ziegler to a degree. I mean, he was a Clark Lee recruit, but I know Marcus Freeman liked him a lot. Josh Burnham was a guy that Marcus Freeman went and got, who's now a Viper. Jaden Osbury is a Freeman recruit. Drake Bowen's a Freeman recruit. Preston Zinner's a Freeman recruit. Keanu Kia was not, but still a good player. And then the incoming freshman class obviously are Freeman guys. So they're very talented. You've got a lot of numbers. You got a lot of versatile players. So I do not want Notre Dame to go for an off-ball linebacker in the portal unless it's a veteran player that's okay not being a starter. That's it. And I just don't know who that's going to be. So for me, if the kid's a Viper and he's can be a legitimate 8, 9, 10 plus sack guy at Notre Dame, he had 14 at UTSA this past year, then I look at him. But if it's just looking at a guy that's going to come in and be an off-ball linebacker, then I'm not as interested in that, to be honest with you. So, but I will look him up and watch this film just because I like watching good film. Iden Banami asked, thank you for super chat, buddy. Loved the right after commitment interview. It was great to see their excitement and story. The Ivan Taylor interview was amazing. Kid is special. More of those. We will definitely be doing more of those. MF next on IB, please. We're trying. Thanks for all you do, IB. You are welcome. Super chat from Nathan Milton. Any chance Braylon James comes out of the portal and stays at Notre Dame? Not much of one. I don't believe. Things would have to change from where they are currently right now for that to be the case. And I don't see those things changing. Quick question from Pete Weber. Will CJ Carr be able to dress and be on the sideline for the game? I don't know the answer to that. I believe he can be on the sideline. I do not believe he can be dressed for the game because he cannot play. He's not eligible to play in the game. So there'd be no reason to suit him up, in my opinion. But Karen Zerwiak, hey, hate to hear this. Says, hi, everyone. Bad cold. I'm sorry to hear that, Karen. I hope that you feel better, but hope listening to the show helps you feel better. Stephen Doty asks, Brian, can you comment on your thoughts on Rudolph given the developmental trajectory of Billy Schrauth? Honestly, Stephen, I'm still in sort of evaluation phase with Joe Rudolph. There are some things we saw this year I did not like. I don't like his emphasis on pin and pull with the current roster. I don't have any problem with pin and pull. I have a problem with you trying to run a bunch of pin and pull with Rocco Spindler and Zeke Carell and Pat Coogan as your inside guys. That's a major red flag for me. I felt that we saw 2 returning starters regress under him compared to where they were with Harry Hiestand last year. It's a red flag. I loved what I saw from Billy Schrauth. He deserves a lot of credit for that. He deserves a lot of credit for Ashton Craig. Love what I saw from them. My counter is, why didn't he play them sooner? You can't tell me the light just went off for them the minute they got put on the field. I've never bought that argument that, this kid gets thrown in. It's like Logan Diggs in 2021. I remember having this argument. I would all year advocate they need to play Logan Diggs more, You're going to wear down Kyron Williams. And then he gets in the game and he plays really well against Virginia because there was an injury. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, he's ready now. Like you're telling me just coincidentally he was ready the minute he was needed because of an injury? No, I don't buy it. He would have been ready before. You needed to give him the opportunity. And that's kind of was my thing I've set up since fall camp. Like, look, if you don't think he's ready to be the 60, 70 snap per game guard, that's fine. But work him into the rotation. Get him some playing time early. Help him to get ready. They chose not to do that. And I think that was a mistake. So, is he going to be a guy that's going to always err on the side of playing the veteran or not? I mean, are we just going to be back next year to Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler again at guard? I don't know. Or is he willing to say, hey, got to develop Billy, got to get him ready to go, and then Pat and Rocco can battle it out for the other guard spot? I don't know. And so and recruiting wise, I think he's done some really good things. I mean, getting Styles Prescott was a nice pickup. You talk about identifying Anthony Knapp. We'll see how he pans out, but I like the senior year film. And then, of course, you got Gilby Lambert, which is a huge home run pickup. And the thing about that is you could say Coach Heastan played a role in that, because Coach Heastan being here is a part of the reason Gilby had the big early interest in Notre Dame. But Notre Dame faded when Coach Heastan left. And so Coach Rudolph had to catch up and get back to being a good standing with Gilby Lambert. So I'm giving him a win on that. Even though he didn't necessarily start that relationship, it wasn't like 2019 when Harry Heastan left and Notre Dame was the leader for like Zeke Carell and Andrew Kristofic and all those guys, or John Olmstead are already committed, where you just don't screw it up type of thing. Coach Rudolph had to do work, legitimate work, to get Gilby Lambert in the class, and he did it. And so props to him for that. So I definitely want to give him credit for that. So I think recruiting wise, and Notre Dame's in a really good position with some good linemen in next year's class, things along those lines. So I do think there's been some things I really like from Coach Rudolph. There's been some things I don't like from Coach Rudolph. So what I'm trying to do as best I can is just but I thought they ended the season pretty well. Let's see what he can do in the bowl game when you're going to have a different looking offensive line in the bowl game, most likely. If he does well, then I'll say, okay, we're trending in the right direction. There's still some questions that have to get answered next season, but you're at least trending in the right direction. And then we'll find out more in the spring. So some things I like, some things that have me concerned. So I'm kind of in a TBD type of place when it comes to his evaluation. I'm trying not to make too harsh of a first year opinion of what he's done, and just say, look, there's some things I like, some things I don't like. Let's see what he can do in year 2. And that's key, because again, he had some big shoes to fill, right? And next year that he's going to know the play. It's like we talked about Al Golden, guys. Al Golden's going to be better in year 2 and year 1. Did I anticipate the defense being as good as it was? Not quite. I mean, I thought this defense could be really good. We talked about it before the season. If this happened, this team can have a top 10 defense, and that's exactly what they did. But did I think it was going to be quite this good? No, not entirely. But you just knew with guys coming back and with being in the system for an extra year, you knew there was going to be, at least from that regard, improvement. And, those are things that I look at and say, if those things can go well, I'm going to be happy about it. Very, very happy about it. Next question. I had one from Backup. How many Polynesian guys are on the team next year? I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, just quickly thinking through it, you'll have, I believe, Tai Chan is Polynesian on offense. I think that's the only one that I could think of. Defensively, you'd have Junior Chalamaka, Kingston Viliama Asa, and Keanu Kia. Just off the top of my head, those are the only ones I can think of off the top of my head. I'd have to, because Maris is leaving, and so I'd have to think about it. I'm not quite sure, but at least those. A Bent ND asks, with a new playoff format and opt-outs and portal, do you see a portion of bowl games disappearing? Do the campus playoff games count as your bowl, or will the losers still play in a bowl? So the good questions, I'm going to take them in reverse order. The playoff game, if you lose the playoff game, your season is over. They will not count as bowl games, I don't believe, but they will be the equivalent of a bowl game for a team. It won't be like, hey, the Notre Dame plays Florida in round 1 at Notre Dame Stadium, and they're gonna have like the ReliaQuest Bowl on the 15-yard line, like it won't be like that, but it will take the place of a bowl game for those teams, is my understanding. Could be wrong on that, but that's my understanding. With the new playoff format and opt-outs and portal, do you see a portion of bowl games disappearing? No, I hope not. Look, there's way too many bowl games from the standpoint of fan-wise, the enjoyment. But I find great value for young people in bowl games. Number one, these kids get to travel somewhere, and in a lot of instances they will never get to go to. There's nowhere to, when is Notre Dame ever going to get to play in El Paso, Texas, or San Diego, or, Charlotte, North Carolina, like some of the places that were rumored to be options, Tampa, Florida, Orlando. Notre Dame's not playing UCF. So those opportunities are there. They're great team bonding and team building opportunities that you otherwise would lose. You'd lose 15 practices in a game. Think about all the reps that Notre Dame would lose from younger players if they went back to just 10, 15 bowls, and let's just say Notre Dame didn't get in one for whatever reason, and you miss all that opportunity. And so, team Minnesota, for example, 5-7. What the heck are they doing in a bowl game? But looking at it from a coach standpoint, but those young men that are part of that team are going to benefit greatly from that opportunity. And so while from a fan standpoint, it's like, dude, you don't need 50 bowls. I think there's like 86, something like that, teams playing in a bowl game this year. That's way too much. Something I would do that I think would be really cool is give like the FCS champ a bowl game against somebody or something like that. That'd be kind of cool. But other than that, I mean, I think for fans, there's too many bowl games. But from a coaching and a player development standpoint, I think it's fine. I think there's a lot of good that comes out of those, preparation wise, team building wise, just letting kids have opportunities to go travel and experience things and get some free gear and all that other kind of stuff. I don't see anything wrong with it in that regard. But I do understand, like, guys, I don't care about the Bowling Green versus 5-7 Minnesota game. I get that. But for those two programs, it's a very important opportunity for them that I don't want to see go away, to be completely honest with you. All right. Okay. So let's get to, I'm just trying to go through some of these here just to make sure there's not any news breaking as we're kind of going through this, because I see some people tweeting certain things and I don't know if they're, it's retweeting my thing. So no one's made any decisions here so far during the show. Wyatt Kerwin with a question. Thank you, Wyatt. If Notre Dame had to join a conference, most people suggest the Big Ten or ACC. Since geography and history clearly don't matter anymore, I think the SEC would be more beneficial. Overall thoughts? I don't think that would be beneficial at all for Notre Dame, because it's not about geography. It's just, I don't know, like you're going into every conference has certain things they can do that Notre Dame can't get away with. That conference is so different in how they operate on a day-to-day basis. Just a lot of them just don't have any academic, like, I don't have any respect for what they do academically with most of their football players. They're doing things under the table, above table now. They're just like, you can't ask Notre Dame to compete with that on a week-to-week basis. There's just not a lot of value. You don't get any value out of playing Ole Miss and Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, and Auburn, and a lot of the teams from the SEC. The only value you get is from playing the best teams, and you're not going to have a schedule that you got to play LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, every single year. It's just, there's no value to it. The benefit of the ACC to me, although right now I'm a little pissed at the ACC and kind of thinking like, you know what, if you're going to screw Notre Dame over, then I don't want to support Notre Dame joining your league to save you anymore. That's an emotional reaction. But if you look at it from a practical standpoint, that's a conference that has a lot of like-minded institutions with Notre Dame. And it's in an area where the geography is very important to Notre Dame's recruiting efforts. There's a lot of reasons why that makes sense. It's a conference that has good enough teams at the top that if you join it and win it, you've got to beat the Clemsons and the Florida States and the Miamis. That's respectable. But it's also not a conference where you've got to have to travel deeper south all the time. There's you're going from Indiana to Boston, Indiana to Pittsburgh, Indiana to Syracuse, Indiana to Virginia, Indiana to North. Those are much easier trips than having to go to Dallas or to Austin, Texas, and Norman, Oklahoma, and all some of the deeper areas. There's going to be trips like that. Miami, Florida State are like that, but most aren't. And so I think there's just a lot of reasons why playing in the ACC would make a lot more sense than playing in the SEC. And that's just kind of my take on that. So I don't have any desire to play in the SEC. I don't. And if it came down to it, Big Ten or SEC, I think it would make more sense for them to join the Big Ten. But I'd rather do neither of those. I'd rather either be independent, or if you have to join a conference, go try to save the ACC, because I'd rather Notre Dame be the team that is used to prevent the two super conferences. And I think if Notre Dame were to make the decision to say, hey, we're going to join the ACC to save the ACC, and it would save the ACC, in my opinion, I think that also helps the Big 12 and then we kind of stay at 4 bigger conferences and not the 2 super conferences, which to me is just going to be stupid. So that's kind of how I look at it. I don't see a lot of value playing in the SEC for me. Again, why I think someone can make a case that there's value playing in the SEC. Just for me, I don't see it. Wyatt also asks, was looking at the 24 Notre Dame scholarship chart on IB. Thank you for that. Clearly board member at Irish Breakdown, or at least I think so. Let's share the free up one. J.D. Bertrand announced that he won't be back at 24. Love our veteran linebackers, but excited to see competition between the young guys. So he didn't announce he's not coming back, but he did accept an invitation to the East-West game. And I think it's East-West Shrine Bowl. Is that what it is? I have to go back and look at it. And guys don't accept those after the season and then turn them down to come back. When he accepted it, JD had already kind of had his meetings with the coaches, and they've already kind of had those conversations about coming back. Then he accepted, because it was like last week. And again, you don't accept those if you're going to come back. So that's why I had Marist off of the list too, because he had already accepted a Senior Bowl invite. Cam Hart had already accepted a Senior Bowl invite. Those are basically signals, hey, I'm not coming back. And so that's why we don't expect those guys to be on the team next year. Now, the question is, will they play in the bowl game or not? That's the final question. RJG Irving, wouldn't Brian's suggested playoff format have avoided all the current controversy? In a lot of ways, yeah, it would. So for those that are not familiar, my playoff format is essentially this. You play it like it used to be. Go back to the old bowl system with the old bowl tie-in. So if you think about it, this year, so what would it be this year? I'm trying to remember. So you'd have the Rose Bowl. So basically you play all the bowl games, and then after the bowl games, you go and you pick your 4 from that. So you have the Rose Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, you have the Peach Bowl, and then you have the Fiesta Bowl. And then there's one more. What's the New Year? An Orange Bowl. Okay. So you take the, Rose Bowl would be Michigan against Washington in the Rose Bowl. Sugar Bowl would be Alabama versus, because it's Big 12 versus SEC, be Alabama versus Texas. So like right there, you have your 4 playoff teams playing in a bowl game right there. You'd have the Orange Bowl would have Florida State in it. And so you have your 5 Power Fives with already have their deal there. Now, the other way I said you could do it is you could have each of the 5 Power 5 champions all get their own bowl. So you change up the bowl system a little bit. So instead of Washington versus Michigan, what you would do is you'd make the winner of the Big Ten gets the Rose Bowl, or gets the Cotton Bowl. The winner of the Pac-12 gets the Rose Bowl. The winner of the SEC gets the Sugar Bowl. The winner of the ACC gets the Orange Bowl. The winner of the Big 12 gets the Fiesta Bowl, something like that. And then you give them an at-large. So then you'd have your 5 Power 5 champs. You'd have a group of whoever your top group of 6 teams would be Liberty to get in there. And then you'd kind of take your next best matchup. So number 6 Georgia would get matched up against somebody. The way I kind of like it is I still like the seeding. If you did it the way that I just mentioned and not the old bowl system, but that second way, and I liked both of them, you'd still have some sort of the number 1 seed kind of gets a lower tiered team. So it's kind of like a playoff, but it's more of a bowl system. And then from there, you pick your 4. And so that, to me, I think would be a great format because it would make the bowls matter a little bit again more. But I got to admit, I've really come around to really liking the notion of the 12-team playoff with home games in that first round. I've come around on that one. I really have. And I think you're going to have teams that have no shot at winning a title in those, but every format's going to kind of have that. There's been years where, 2019, Oklahoma had no chance of winning a national championship. Notre Dame 2020 had no chance of winning it. They weren't going to beat Alabama and Ohio State that season. I just don't think it happens. Nicholas Garrosh asks, do guys have an overall strategy as to how Notre Dame should deal with the portal and NIL? With the portal, I actually think Notre Dame's handling pretty well. Marcus Freeman said it in the interview with Robert Griffith. He said it 100 times. Notre Dame is always going to primarily be a high school recruiting and development program, and they should. Most top teams are. Georgia's that way. Bama's that way. Ohio State's that way. Michigan's that way. And then they supplement needs with the portal. Michigan has transfers. Georgia has transfers. Bama has transfers. Florida State has a lot of transfers. Their situation's different because of the situation that Mike Norvell walked into. He needed to be more of a portal guy. But a lot of the best teams, they're not heavy portal guys. You recruit and develop your players. And that's what Notre Dame's going to be. And I think they're handling it well. And then you go pick the right needs that you have. Notre Dame's mostly does 1-year transfers, just the nature of where they are. I could see them getting some 2 years from time to time. I mean, Brandon Joseph could have been a 2-year guy, but that didn't work out. So I think they're handling it well. And NIL, look, I know some people don't believe me when I say this, but guys, Notre Dame's players are making a lot of money. I talked with a player the other day, and I'm going to share a story about a conversation how with his dad that he said I can share, but I'm going to wait till the season's over with. He he's not getting a Christmas card from me this year. I'll just share that with you. But he was messing with me a little bit. But anyway, the conversation he and I were having was like, look, yeah, schools are throwing a lot of money at us, but Notre Dame's doing enough to say with the other benefits of being at Notre Dame, we're content, we're happy, we're good. None of the guys that jumped in the portal for Notre Dame, to me, from what I know, jumped in the portal simply because they want money. Now, will some of them get money? Sure. But you've got to recruit to the right way to make sure that you don't have kids that are just going to come here. And if they play well, like there's a kid that jumped in the portal today. And I texted Ryan and I said, if there was one kid from last year's class that you just assumed was going to jump in the portal, I assumed he was. Who's your top guy? He said somebody different. I was like, that's a good one. But mine was this kid. And I won't say who it is because I don't want to blow the kid up. But I said he's going to go in the portal after a year. And it was going to be for one of two reasons. He didn't play. And so he's mad he didn't play. And he's going to leave. Or if he did play as a freshman and played well, he's going to jump in the portal to get another payday. It's exactly what's going to happen. But those kids aren't coming to Notre Dame in the first place anyway. And I don't want kids like that. I don't want mercenaries. I mean, I have no problem with Sam Hartman coming to Notre Dame and getting paid. And I have no problem with Javonte Jean-Baptiste or Thomas Harper or Riley Leonard or any of the other guys that Notre Dame is looking at in the portal. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with current players getting NIL money if they're getting it for the right reasons in the right way. I'm not a pay-for-play guy when it comes to those kind of deals. So I think Notre Dame's handling it fine. I mean, their kids are getting a lot more money than some of y'all realize. And they are competitive in NIL, which is why in this NIL era, Notre Dame is still recruiting at a higher level than we've seen in a very long time. Why? Is it just because Marcus Freeman's charming and Chad Bowden is an absolute monster on the trail? No, that's part of it. But it's also because they come on these visits, they talk to players, they find out, wow, Michael Mayer made how much money? Kyle Hamilton made how much money? Sam Hartman's making how much? This guy who's not even a starter is making seriously? So they're doing fine. Are they throwing around money just to get you to come here? No. Are they using the brand to create a lot of NIL opportunities? Absolutely. And that's a big reason Riley Leonard's looking at Notre Dame. And so those are all aspects of it that I say. I think are there things they can improve upon? Sure. There's always going to be an evolution and an improvement that can be made. But I actually think their Portland and NIL strategy so far is good. They're avoiding the mercenaries that are only coming for a payday. Look, Sam Hartman's a mercenary. You're bringing him here for a year. Javonte Jean-Baptiste, Thomas Harper. In the very, very definition of it, they're mercenaries. They're just coming here for a year to help you accomplish a goal. I'm more referring to those guys that you literally have to buy. They didn't have to buy Javonte Jean-Baptiste. They didn't have to buy Thomas Harper. Those guys saw value in being at Notre Dame and being a part of what Notre Dame's trying to build. Same with Sam Hartman. Sam Hartman saw value in that. Now, did they get some NIL money along the way? Absolutely. That's okay. But if it's like, I'm either going to go here or here, and whoever's going to pay me the most, that's where I'm going. I don't know that I want that guy. Like, I don't want a guy like Beryl Alexander. As talented as he is, you are on the best team in college football, and you're going to USC for one reason and one reason only. That. I don't want that guy. Bear has the right to do whatever he wants to do. But for me, trying to build a football program, that's not the kind of guy I want. And so I think Notre Dame's handling it well. They're not going after those guys. They're not wasting their time with those guys. And it's a good place to be, in my opinion. Andrew Gilmore asks, is it true that Ohio State is targeting Riley Leonard as well? Yes, they are. They're one of several teams. But as I said, I still feel very good about where Notre Dame stands as of right now. Pete Weber asks, is there a portion of fund that tries to use those funds to retain players that are getting later round feedback? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm sure. But again, I don't think that Notre Dame is luring those kids back and say, hey, man, if you come back, we'll give you extra money. It's more about, hey, dude, you're going to make X amount of dollars. You're already making X amount of dollars. Why go to the NFL, make less money than you're making now? And or come back, get your master's, get your bachelor's, whatever. You're going to still make six figures just on what you're already getting. And you can build your game and be a higher draft pick next year. Those conversations are absolutely happening with some of these guys. With others, it's like, we can't. You're ready. I mean, you're ready. I'm not going to convince you to come back. You're ready, either mentally ready, emotionally ready, physically ready, whatever. You're ready to play. Gregory Gilbert, most impressive thing from Estimate was the one fumble this year. What's funny, Gregory, is somebody in the chat was somehow Kyron had some fumbling issues. And I'm like, so did Audric for his first year. And then he had the one against Navy this year. But like last year, he got benched against UNLV for that fumble. And he never put the ball on the ground again the rest of the year. Like he was held accountable and he responded the way you want to respond. This year, he fumbles the ball early in the first quarter against Navy. He's looking really good already. And they don't play in the rest of the half. And they put the ball on the ground in the rest of the year. That's what you want. You want a guy that's got some accountability. And then Jabron Payne fumbles late in the game late in the drive against Stanford, ends up being a touchdown. But Coach Freeman goes to Audric and starts chewing out Audric and Coach McCullough. They created accountability in that room where putting the ball on the ground is not acceptable. And it started because why? Because Coach McCullough made the decision to put Audric on the bench for the rest of the first half and play guys that never played before. Because it's like, there's a standard here that I have in my room that this is not what we do. And it's, Coach Freeman doesn't want it either. And Audric took that lesson to heart. And the next 3 games goes for over 100 yards, doesn't put the ball on the ground again. It was a great lesson. It was an absolutely great lesson. And it was impressive to see him be better about that. And then we have a question from Eric Santini. I believe this is going to be the last question we have. I just want to see if there's any more that popped up here at the end. Nope, that is it. So we're going to answer this one. So Eric Santini says, do y'all think a good comp for Jeremiah Love is Jahmyr Gibbs, just based on the burst and elusiveness? I think they have some similarities. Eric, I think there's some similarities there. I think there's some fairness to that. Are they direct comparisons? No, I mean, Jeremiah is longer and some different things and can use a little differently in the pass game, although they're both impactful pass catchers potentially. But elusiveness, he's got, Jahmyr's not from what I remember, not a shaky guy where he's just juking everybody all the time, but he's a slasher. He's sudden, he can cut, he can make you miss, but he likes to be working this way and he can make plays in the pass game. And he's, and Jeremiah, he's not the biggest guy, but he has some toughness as a runner from what I remember. And then same thing with Jeremiah Love. So I think that's a pretty fair comparison. I'd have to go back and watch a little bit more of Jahmyr just to see how close of a comparison it is. But just my gut reaction is I think that's a fair comparison of those two players. Just their dynamic skill sets. They have some elusiveness, but they're explosive. They're elusive. They're explosive. They can make plays in the run game and pass game. Neither are just run downhill A gap all day for 25 carries either. So yeah, there's some really some really good comparisons there. I like that. So that's a good observation, Eric. So that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. Thank you guys so much for being with me today, guys and gals. Karen, I hope you're feeling better. And everybody else who maybe is a little under the weather in this winter season, hope you all are feeling better as well. I'm going to get out of here. We've got a lot going on at Irish Breakdown, so make sure you all have checked that out. irishbreakdown.com is our main website. That's where we have all our free written content. And then boards at irishbreakdown.com is where we have all of our premium content. So definitely check those out. And we appreciate all of you that are supporting Irish Breakdown and part of this community. It is an absolute blast being a part of it. Have a great show. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the show. And I'll talk to you guys again very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.